Hello everyone, welcome to the Cloud Learn AWS Zero to Hero series. This is day 4, and in this video, we are going to learn about the first AWS service, Identity Access Management, which we also called it as IAM. Right. In the previous video, we have seen like how to create the free tier account, how to secure that using the multi-factor authentication. We have seen like how to create a custom password policy, and also we have seen how to log in, right? So the moment once we create the AWS account, whether it's a free tier account or a regular account, like after 1 year it will become a non-free tier, right? The only way to log into the AWS account using the root account, which means the email address and the password. Just assume that you are working for a company and they're going to maintain all the resources in the AWS cloud, which means in your team, there are multiple people. Let us say you are going to be a team lead, then there are some senior people, and then junior interns, multiple people. Let us say there are 5 people, 5 employees working in our team, and they are responsible to create and manage the servers, storages, databases, everything. To create that, they have to log into the AWS account. How to log in? They have to, as of now, the only way is to use the email address and password. But it is not a best practice to share the credentials with multiple people. What does that mean? Using a single username and password, we should not allow multiple people to log in. Why? Because if multiple people are using the same credentials, we cannot track which user is doing what kind of activities, which is not acceptable as per the security policies. But we can't create a separate AWS account for every employee. Why? If I have one AWS account and if you are having another AWS account, I can't see what you have created. I can't manage the servers which are available in your AWS account. Instead, we have to share access to the single AWS account. Instead of sharing the same credentials with multiple people, we have to share the account to multiple users with their own usernames and passwords, right? That can be achieved using the identity access management, which is IAM. And there are multiple things which we are going to cover in this particular video. Let's get into the IAM session. So the IAM is an AWS managed service. It is an AWS managed service which can be used to control the access to your AWS resources as per the requirement. What exactly that means? Let us say there are 3 employees working in your team and they need access to your AWS account so that they can manage the resources like servers, databases, storage, load balancers, everything. Let us say 3 users. Let us say there are 3 users. User 1, for understanding purpose, just I can say user 1, user 2, and user 3. Out of these 3, I don't want to give full access to all these 3 users. Instead, we have multiple services, right? 200 plus services. I want to allow the user 1, he's a senior employee. I want to give him admin access, means full control, so that he can do anything on the AWS account. Let us say the user 2 belongs to QE team, testing team. So I would like to provide only read-only access, means he can read, he can view, but he can't create or he can't delete. Let us say user 3 is a developer. Let us say user 3 is a developer. So he need full access on EC2 service. EC2 service, which means instead of providing unnecessary access to every user, we can control what they have to access. That is what that the securely control access to AWS resources. And also we can manage those users and their level of access, like what kind of access they should get. Admin access, read-only access, full control on a single service, full control on a multiple services that we can design. And again, IAM is a global service which doesn't belong to a region. What does that mean? Let us say if I am going to create a server, let us say I'm going to create a server which is a EC2 service, which we haven't covered. The next service is going to be the EC2. Whenever you are going to create a server, this has to be physically present in a geographical location. So it requires a region. We need to select a region before creating the server. But the IAM service doesn't belong to any region. Whatever the users we create, they are available on all regions. They are available on all regions, which means a global service. And this IAM allows you to create users, groups, policies, and roles. We can discuss what exactly group is, what is a policy, what is a role, and everything. Let me give you a brief overview. Quickly, let me explain what is a user. User is an individual employee, right? A user, an account for every employee so that they can access. Group. Let us say in your organization, you have multiple teams. Let us say admin team, infrastructure admin team, development team, QE team, right? So instead of creating the users like this, what we do is first we will create groups. For every team, we will create one group like this. Let us say this is a group for admins, this is a group for developers, and this is a group for QE. What I will do whenever I create a users, let us say admin 1, admin 2, admin 3, and so on. I will add these users into the group. Why? Because to manage these users with the help of a group is more easy. How? Let us say I need to provide full permissions, full access to these three users. Instead of providing the permissions to these three users individually, I can provide permission on the group with the help of a policy. How the permissions can be provided using a policy. I will apply or I will attach a policy to this group so that this policy will be applied to all the users present in that particular group. Let us say in going forward, if I want to apply an extra permission to all these three users, simply I can add another policy which can provide the permissions to those three users. Instead of applying the same policy on individual users, we can apply on the group. So groups is a container in which we can collect a similar object. So here the object is a user. This is for easy administration. Policy, policy is a document. Policy is a document which is written in JSON format. Don't worry, we are not going to learn about what is a JSON and everything. Amazon is providing a virtual editor by using which we can generate this JSON script as per our requirement. In the practicals, I will show you how can we generate our JSON script and all the things which is required for our policies. Then the roles. Role is also a similar to the policy, but the use case is a different. Role is also similar to the policy, but the use case is different. What is the use case? Let me tell you. Let us say here there is a server, or I can say the service called EC2. Let us say this is a service 1. And here there is a user. Let us say the user is user 1. And here there is a storage, S3, which is a storage, which is a service 2. Okay, now listen carefully. Now, if I want to provide access to this user 1 with full access to these two services, then I have to attach a policy. With the help of a policy, we can provide some access permissions to a user so that the user can manage the resources. The service 1 is resource 1, service 2 is a resource 2. Then sometimes in the EC2, there will be a huge data available. I want to allow this EC2 server to use this particular storage to read the data or to store the data onto the storage. In this case, I have to apply a role so that this server or this service 1 or a resource 1 can access service 2 or resource 2. Technically speaking, The role also contains a policy. To understand this better, I will explain a different way. Let us say you have purchased a mobile phone from the US. Okay, assume you purchased a mobile phone from the US. So what you will get, you don't get the Indian plug, right? You will get a US plug, which cannot be fit into the which cannot be fit into Indian sockets, Indian power sockets. Now you can assume the US plug as a policy, right? Which we cannot directly insert into the Indian power socket. Then what we do, we use a converter, right? The same way, the role the role contains a policy, and this role can be attached to the resources because we can't apply a policy directly to the services or resources. I think it gave you some brief overview. During the practicals, we can understand it more clear. Now, what are the features? What are the features of the IAM apart from these four? It's purely for a security of your AWS account. So shared access to your AWS account means we can create multiple users, user one, user two, user three, and we can provide a shared access to your AWS account without sharing common credentials to multiple people. Granular permissions means if user one requires a full permissions, we can provide full permissions to user two. If you want to provide just read only to the user two, you can provide read only permission. If he requires read and write or a full permission on a single service, that also possible. That is what the granular permissions. Based on your requirement, you can assign the permissions to the individual users. If you remember in the previous video, the AWS free tier account creation video, we have enabled multi-factor authentication for the root user, right? That multi-factor authentication is also a feature of IAM service. Next time, whenever you are enabling multi-factor authentication, just observe that that multi-factor authentication is available under IAM service. And we can create our own password policies because every organization can have their own password policies like minimum length of the password, like 10 characters length, 15 characters length, 20 characters length. It must contain a capital letter, lowercase letter, special character, number. The password must be changed every 30 days, 40 days, 60 days, right? That you can configure on the AWS account so that that will be applicable to every user. Every user exists in that AWS account. Identity federation. What is this identity federation? Any idea? If you have any idea about the identity federation, just leave a comment in the comment section. Okay. In a simple way, I can say identity federation is nothing but single sign-on. What does that mean? Single sign-on. Okay. You are working for a company, right? They will provide you a laptop. How you can log into the laptop? Just they will provide you a username and a password, right? So there is a concept of Active Directory domain services and all. You will get a username and password. So if there is a AWS account, right? Again to log in, you will get another username and password. If you have another application, again you will get a username and password. So it is not that much easy to manage or maintain multiple usernames and passwords for every user. They can't remember, right? So coming to this identity federation, what we can do is we can integrate the AWS with your internal Active Directory or user database or anything. So using your organization credentials, you can log into AWS account. Simple example. I think everybody will have a Google account, right? Google account. Using the Google account, you can log into Gmail, you can log into YouTube, you can log into Google Drive, you can log into Google Classroom. The same username and password, you can log into multiple things. That is what the single sign-on. This IAM provides that single sign-on feature. Every organization will use this identity federation, and this supports PCI DSS compliance. So if you are whatever what we call that, if you are creating an account after 1 month, if you have any bill, right, you have to make the payment. So you will enter your card details and all, right? Does your card secure? Do they store all the data in a secure way? Yes, because they're compliant with the standard called PCI DSS, which means Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. PCI DSS means whatever the requirements or whatever the guidelines are there to store your payment card details, by following those guidelines, they will store your data in a secure way. So these are the features of the IAM. And coming to the users, already we have seen there are two types of users, a root user and an IAM user, right? Root user is the owner of the AWS account. So whenever we created the AWS account, the first account which got created with your email address is called as the root account. He is the owner. They will get full control on the AWS account, full control. And AWS never recommend to use the root account for your day-to-day activities. Even though you are an administrator, you have to create an account for yourself with your name, and you have to assign the admin access to that particular user, and you have to do your day-to-day activities. So in a simple way, I can say root user is not for your day-to-day activities. Root user is the owner of the AWS account, which gets complete admin access. Then the next type of a user is an IAM user. I have given some brief overview, right? So IAM users are not a separate AWS accounts. They are a user account within the AWS account. Every user will get their own username and password. Every user will get a username and password. And every IAM user has two types of access. Access type means the way how they have to log into, they can log into the AWS account. A simple way. Let us say if you want to travel from Hyderabad to Bangalore, what are the different ways that you can travel? One, by your own car, or by your own, by a bus, or by train, or by flight, right? If you are brave enough, you can go on by walk also. That's a different case. So the way how you can reach the destination, there's a different types of access, right? Here, the way how the user can access the AWS account, there are two types. We can assign, being an administrator, we can assign what type of access that the user requires. If they need, we can assign two also. What exactly these two are, I will discuss that. And when, let us say if I create a user called user 0 with all default options, he will get no permissions. By default, a user will get no permissions means if I create a user 0 with a password, he can log in, but he can't see anything. Forget about create or delete. Even he can't read any data, which means by default, a new user will get no permissions. Being a fresher in an interview, if someone asks you like by default, what permissions that a user will get, an IAM user will get, you have to say no access or no permissions. Right. Now, coming to the AWS Management Console access type. So here, this is the AWS account. This is your AWS account. Let us say if I create an AWS IAM user for you, and if I provide management console access type, which means you can log into the AWS account or you can access the AWS account using a browser. Means you will get a username and a password. With the help of username and password, you can log into the AWS account using a browser like Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Mozilla Firefox, Safari, any browser. Whereas the programmatic access type is used to access the AWS account using CLI, SDK, or API. What is a CLI stands for? Command line interface. By opening a command prompt, you can execute some commands and you can communicate with the AWS account. And here, whatever we can do with the browser, the same thing we can do with the CLI also, CLI, SDK, and API. Generally, being a solutions architect, we use the management console access type. Then who can use the CLI? Generally, the DevOps team will use the CLI, command line interface tools. SDK stands for, any guess? Software Development Kit. If you are a developer who is designing or who is developing an application with the help of AWS resources, then the application you can design using the software development kit and you can communicate with your AWS account. API. What is the API? What is the A stands for? Not Amazon. A stands for Application Programming Interface. Application Programming Interface. So these are used by the developers. And this sometimes dev team will use, sometimes DevOps will use, sometimes operations team will use, and all. So basically, the programmatic access type is used or required to communicate with the AWS account with the help of a code or commands. I will show you both the type of accesses, but whatever you can do using the management console access, the same thing you can do using the programmatic access type. Instead of using the browser or a graphical user interface, you have to use some commands in the programmatic access type, right? Then groups, already I said, similar objects, right? Collection of identical users. Users will inherit the permissions from the group, means whatever the permissions you applied on the group, those permissions will be automatically applicable to all the users present in the group. That is for easy management. Easy management. And how we can apply the permissions with the help of a policy. Policy is a JSON document. Policy is a document which is written in the JSON. These policies can be applied on the group, or the same policy can be applied to a user. We will see both cases, like how can we apply the permissions to a user directly by attaching the policy or by adding the user into the group. And the roles, it can be used to provide permission to the resources. Resources means server 1 is a resource 1, server 2 is a resource 2, database 1 another resource, storage bucket another resource, and so on. If you want to allow one resource to access another resource, we have to provide the permissions, and that permissions can be applied using the roles, right? Okay, now already we have seen all these things, right? We have seen all these things. I hope you got you got some clarity about what exactly the IAM, identity access management, and what it does and all. So we have seen the theory part. In the next video, we are going to see the practicals, like creating a user, providing a permissions, using the groups, direct, like applying a policy and all, right? If you have any questions on this particular video, just leave your comments on the comment section. I will take care of your questions. Thank you guys. We'll meet in the next video with the practicals on identity access management. If you like this video, please share and subscribe. Thank you everyone.